The J. Michael Show.
My guest this evening is Bret Mosley from the land down under. Let's say hello to Bret. Hey, Bret.
Hey there. How's it going, Jay?
It's going good. It's going good. It's going good. I used to go see you in Hattiesburg in Mississippi, and now you're a half a world away.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for the introduction. I will note I'm not the question of the lifetime for me of the centuries is where is Bret Mosley from?
Yeah,
Because I grew up all over the place.
but
Well,
but
I'm not definitely not.
You were born in Texas, though, right?
I was born in the Big Bend in Brewster County in Alpine, where Sul Ross University is located.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I'm not from down under. I'm from Texas slash Brooklyn slash, yeah. My dad was in the Navy. We moved around. I was in 12 schools in 12 grades.
Yeah, yeah. So you moved around the entire country, but I saw you originally, gosh, it's been at least 10 years. In Hattiesburg, Mississippi, there was a bar you would come to. Got your first album, your Light and Blood there. Loved the album, man. Every cut on that album is awesome.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I had to interview you. I need to see what's going on with Bret now in Aussie land.
Yeah. Well, I've been down here actually coming up on 10 years.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah. So I came down initially to the western part of this country, which is it's a state called Western Australia, and Texans don't quite know how to take it. It's 3.5 times the size of Texas.
Wow.
But it has the population of less than the DFW Metroplex.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, there's a person about every day and a half.
So you're out in the outback.
Essentially,
Yeah.
yeah. Essentially, yeah. That's where I was, and then I married a girl who's from what they call here the Eastern States, which is where they have buildings and books and plumbing and all that other stuff. And she's from here, and that's where we live now in really kind of the cultural hub of the country. It's kind of widely generally accepted that the Melbourne metropolitan area, the Melbourne and the state of Victoria, where Melbourne is located, is really kind of the artsy, creative hub, cultural hub of the country in many ways. And that's where we are. We've been here now for just a handful of years.
But now you tour all over Australia as well as you used to tour in America. You're kind of in various different little towns and things along that area.
Yeah.
What's the difference, in your opinion, between, say, West Texas and Australia?
Wow. Well, make sure you got plenty of hard drive space here. That every day that goes by, the differences are more and more pronounced. Okay. The culture here has a completely different foundation once you get past, colonized by European, predominantly British influences, English speaking, widely Anglo-Saxon, Caucasian. You think, so these countries can't be that different, right?
Right.
Not at the end of the day, they couldn't be more different.
Wow.
Yeah. How would I describe the differences? I mean, West Texas to Australia, or maybe are you thinking like the country part of Australia compared to the country part of Texas?
Well, also
overall?
like, the outback, which is desert-like,
Yeah.
and then Arizona
Yeah.
and Texas desert-like. So,
Yeah.
but you would think that your Australian sort of Western towns would be different from America, right?
Well, they would be now. They would be. If it was still the 1950s in America, they'd be really similar.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I don't just live a long ways away from home. I live a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. How does that feel?
How does it feel? It can be maddening.
Uh-huh.
It can be quaint and charming. It can be a breath of fresh air. It can be excruciatingly wholesome.
Yeah.
It can be very civil.
Right.
This is a in a nutshell. What you have here is a largely egalitarian, civil, considerate culture, and people kind of keep to themselves in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get in your face anything like, the stereotypical American, the loudmouth American.
Mm-hmm.
They're much more reserved and much less in general. I'm being very general here. Much less passionate and expressive, and the our home country,
Mm-hmm.
um, in many respects, it's a warlike nation. It's a warlike culture, I'll have to
Oh,
say.
describe that. What do you mean by a warlike culture?
Well, I'm speaking of the United States.
Yeah.
That it, yeah, what it well, one of the reasons the culture is, in my view, so different here.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have a revolutionary war against the crown, a successful revolutionary war against the crown.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have the kind of mass, widespread slave labor based industry that was a dominant force in the world's economy. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't have that. They didn't have a subsequent civil war about that.
Mm-hmm.
Here they haven't really experienced the same kinds of maybe societal traumas.
Mm-hmm.
It's a I like, one of my little punchlines is that David Byrne, with from the Talking Heads, one of his songs, he summed it up really well, and it's heaven is a place where nothing ever happens.
Wow. Wow. It reminds
So
me of your song Gun War. Do you have gun
mm,
issues on that side of the world?
zero,
Zero.
zero.
Do
Yeah, no,
people
it's
in
a
Australia own guns?
yeah, farmers,
Yeah.
they because they'll have farmers deal with kangaroos would tear the heck out of their fences.
Mm-hmm.
There's really, really, really bad snakes here.
Wow.
I wouldn't want to be living out on a farm without something
To
to deal
shoot.
with in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't have any substantial land predators here. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of red foxes that the Brits brought over to do their fox coursing and chasing that are now, an invasive kind of ubiquitous species. Um, but yeah, so you don't have the kind of aggressive, competitive, or bent on success and excellence. You don't have those kinds of attitudes here
Mm-hmm.
to anything like the same extent. I'll have to say, and this is all my commentary.
Mm-hmm.
This is a mild, easygoing culture. They I'm still looking to really get my finger on the pulse of what they hold to be really, really
Mm-hmm.
passionately sacred.
Mm-hmm.
What do they really deeply care about? Um, it's kind of easy come, easy go because life is just not that hard.
So people there in
Um,
Melbourne don't feel the need to own a gun.
you would never feel that. No.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those you can leave your doors unlocked and you're safe. You feel safe. You're okay.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, yeah, you wouldn't leave your doors unlocked in Melbourne. People will come in and take your TV, take your computer, whatever. That's still
Right.
something that can happen. Um, but yeah, so what happened in Australia, I can't tell you the year. I don't know their national history down to a T. But in Tasmania, there was a mass shooting.
Mm-hmm.
decades ago. And they resolved as a nation at that point to everybody just sold their guns back to the government. And there were there were dumpsters full of firearms that were just, being melted down. And and I know this is interesting to jump right into something like this to make this kind of contrast, but there are so many underpinning, so many preceding factors that lead up to, if you'd say, okay, USA and Australia, guns, no guns, it's very, very different. But the reasons for that are really deep and really long standing. They do have violent crime, and people still, but even knife ownership, you can't buy a knife unless, I think you've got to be 18. You've got to show ID to buy a knife.
That's interesting.
Here. Like at the camping store, the equivalent of some sort of a camping fishing store like that.
Right.
You can't buy a knife unless you're an adult.
Does it depend on the size of the knife or what you intend to use it for, or what?
There probably are some factors, but as far as I understand it, you couldn't go to a kitchen supply place and buy you couldn't buy a meat cleaver unless you were an adult.
Interesting. Well, from your point of view, American music, making music in America, Australian music, making music in Australia, is there a difference there? Do you feel a difference?
About as difference as the difference between oranges and concrete. Wow. It's the quickest. That's the quickest cheeky contrast I could come up with. Yeah. It's a different. This place is out of this world.
Yeah.
It's out of this world. This world of you and I. We have a common cultural heritage, the two of us, and we both, and we talk sort of the same. And
a little bit of that drawl going on.
Yeah. None of that other. I'm not even going to try an Australian accent. It's impossible. But it's a different prospect in my experience. There's so many factors of contrast. Like you said, if you want to contrast the two lives, the two places, with somebody who's as homesick as I am as well. I miss those American audiences so much. I mean, even Australian musicians that I've worked with here, who've toured and worked and in some cases lived in the States for a short period of time. They say, God, Americans, they show up at the venue excited for the music, excited to be there for the music, which is very, very different from a kind of circumspect sort of.
You're an interesting person.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we think of this, which is, or.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you feel like Australians get into the music as much as Americans do? And you're kind of talking about that. Go ahead.
Do they get into anything that much? I've been threatening for a while to publish an essay on Substack about this very conversation, these questions.
Yeah.
The contrasting cultures. To my reckoning, there are three things that I've been able to observe and identify that the folks here really do embrace, hold close as sacred things. Beer.
Okay.
Footy, which is their Australian version of football.
Okay.
Footy. And a rather egalitarian kind of version of the golden rule that's actually enshrined in their national values.
Uh-huh.
And it's referred to as making sure that everyone has a quote unquote fair go,
Uh-huh.
has a fair chance,
Yeah.
which which puts a really high priority on parity,
Mm-hmm.
equal footing, equal, it's very egalitarian. It prizes, it seems to me to really prize parity, let everyone have a shot
Mm-hmm.
over, say, be the biggest billionaire you can be
Right.
excellent, outdo everybody,
Right.
conquer the world. You can be president of the United States, little girl. You can be whatever. You can be huge. Your life can matter so much to the whole world, and you can be very important, and you can be a dominant presence in your world.
Uh-huh.
That's not there. They really don't. It's not about that. And they work to live. They don't live to work here.
Okay.
The so yeah, as in terms of passion,
Yeah.
I published a little video posted a video on this. I went to for the first time a couple of weekends ago with my wife's family, her and her family, her dad and brother and such, to their kind of like their Superdome, their
Uh-huh.
big stadium, 100,000 plus capacity stadium. They're the Melbourne Cricket Grounds, their
Uh-huh.
big stadium. Like that's where, Taylor Swift played her shows when she was here. It's a
Yeah.
big spot. And it's their cricket hub for the country. And it's also for their football,
Mm-hmm.
the big thing. And there were 92,311 people there, and it was it was a very special game. One of the players was being honored on the occasion of his 300th game,
Uh-huh.
and he kicked a goal right at the top of the game,
Uh-huh.
and there was a pretty good roar. I've gone to many games at, let's say, the Texas Stadium,
Yeah.
in a giant stadium.
Yeah.
There was a pretty good roar from those 92,000 people as they were shocked all of a sudden that this fella had kicked a goal on the day that he was being honored for his long career. Um, and then his team, for the rest of the day, they got trounced. But there was, all in all, such a just really mild participation from the crowd.
Hmm.
Just not there a few guys that had had enough beer standing out behind where we were sitting. They'd holler every once in a while and come on boys or this or that.
Uh-huh.
But it's no, it's a very there's a stiff upper lip, reserved, um, uh, and a little bit arm's length detached
Mm-hmm.
kind of feeling to it for me on stage with audiences.
Yeah, I was
And
going
they're
to
very,
ask you when you first arrived there 10 years ago or so, what was your reaction to audiences and what was their reaction to you and your music from America?
um, really, really positive, just
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. Um, I hit the ground running um, on a couple of fairly large festivals.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to some connections with artists in America who knew established artists and people here.
Mm-hmm.
So I came out the gate and felt like I gained a good bit of ground really early on and established myself where I could, as you were talking about earlier, I could go do what I had done in the States for 10 years, and that's just get in the car and go town to town and keep going. And I'm still doing that to the fullest extent possible in here, given the population sparsity and distribution and venues. And the response was, it worked in my favor to a great extent. The novelty
Yeah.
This is not what we normally hear. He doesn't go about it in a way that we're used to having people go about it. His, the stage presence, the banter, the songs themselves, the instrumentation, the way of playing, it was all new. And that really helped, kind of get a footing here. And then, back to that fair go thing in fairly short order, especially in Western Australia where I was. There are about 20, 25 venues in the state that were really worth me pursuing. 25 venues in a state 3.5 times the size of Texas.
Wow.
So you're driving 2.5 days between shows sometimes. And it's even here in the more where the population is much denser here in the eastern part of the country. You don't have anywhere to play on a Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night. It's all Friday to Sunday for the most part, with very few exceptions. When I hit the ground, when I left Brooklyn and started touring in the South, where you and I first connected, I was playing, and I was just hell-bent to really break ground all the way from Virginia down through the Carolinas to Georgia, across Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. And I did that, in addition to stuff in other regions in the Rockies and elsewhere. But when I kind of said bye-bye to Brooklyn and hit the road to do that going south, just by contrast again, at one point I played 28, 29 nights without a night off, Monday to Sunday. And that's something that just I think there are only 27 million people down here. That there's that
no
can't
way to do
happen.
that. Yeah.
No way.
This
No way.
traveling, you said 2.5 days between towns. That wears you out a little bit.
It does. Yeah, I mean, it's it wears. I had an old. I when I was living over there, I had an old 2000 Ford Falcon wagon that had ran on petrol, they call it here, gasoline, and as well as LPG. So it ran on gas and petrol, and I put, I don't know, at least 500,000 miles on that thing in 6 years.
Yeah. Is gas cheaper over there than it is in the States, or do you recall, or would you know now?
How much you paying a gallon?
Actually, we're about $4 a gallon here right now.
$4 a gallon. Okay, we're paying about $1.75 to $1.90 a liter. So I don't know how you. What is that? Couple of liters is a gallon, something like that, I think.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's cheaper, definitely.
Maybe a little bit cheaper. I haven't really checked.
Well,
and you drive on
corporate everything. One person raises their gas prices, and everybody else feels like they have to do the same thing, even if they have a surplus of gas. So gas goes up and down based on a lot of different corporate measurements that may have absolutely nothing to do with the economy at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you drive on the other side of the road here. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you that. Is it like Britain? You drive on the wrong side of the road, as we would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The steering wheel is in the passenger seat.
Do you have to get used to that?
Took a while. Yeah, it did. It took me a good 6-8 months to feel comfortable once I got down here. And my excuse for that is that I had put so many miles in driving the other way, the way that you still drive.
Right.
I had done that for so long, for such great distance, that it was really programmed into me to. That's how it went. The hardest part about it now still is turning around to back up, to go in reverse.
Yeah.
Like to look over that shoulder. My spine's like, that's still a little bit weird.
Yeah.
And there have been a few times leaving somewhere, leaving the house, maybe in a hurry and distracted or tired, where I'll pull out of the driveway into the wrong lane.
Oh.
Be like, oops, wait, hey, okay, let's get that sorted. Yeah.
But you're in Melbourne now, so do you find more places around the town, the city to play than you do out in the outback?
Actually, I'm a lot busier in the regional markets than I am in the metropolitan markets. But there are some. Melbourne fancies itself kind of a live music capital to, and they do. They have hundreds of venues in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And there's an area of the city, the northern suburbs of Melbourne, above the Yarra River, that in terms of the vibe, there's a number of really good rooms that I've begun to play there on recurring basis.
Yeah.
It's quite a hub.
Right.
But just like in the States, in this respect, for me, it's a lot easier for me to make my valiant attempt to pay the bills by getting out and playing in the provinces, playing in regional markets, where they'll have pubs, restaurants, venues out there that you're not competing with all the other stuff that's going on in the city, in the metropolitan markets. So just as I say, just like in the States, when I first started touring nationally, it became really obvious. Unless you can really draw, unless your career is at a point where you're holding the cards and wherever you're going to play, they're going to be a good handful, of a couple of hundred to many thousand people showing up because you're there, because you have that kind of draw and that kind of following. Unless you've gotten that, unless you've really made it to that point, you pay to play in metropolitan areas a lot of times, or there's just so much competition or karaoke and other stuff that people want to do that, you don't, by and large, I wasn't getting paid the same to play in Denver or Chicago or Nashville or New York or Portland or Tucson, the same way I was getting paid to play in Hattiesburg.
Right.
Or Oxford, or Jackson, or Starkville, even one of the best markets in the country for me. And Starkville, Mississippi, Mississippi State. It's the only place in America to this day where I've cut an exclusive deal with a venue. I won't play any other venue but yours. In Dave's Dark Horse Tavern in Starkville, Mississippi.
Oh yeah.
And it's it's a big deal. I did really well year after year, just going into Mississippi and playing Blue Canoe in Tupelo, playing Dave's Dark Horse in Starkville, and then playing one of a couple of venues in Jackson. And then there was also stuff down Hattiesburg and all the way down to Ocean Springs, where I could spend a week playing in Mississippi.
Right. Never leave the state.
Never leave the state. And to this day, if you go back through the old Excel spreadsheets of mine, I've played more shows in Mississippi than anywhere else.
Wow.
Still to this day.
You were awesome. One question that I have for you, and that is the difference between playing with American musicians and playing with Australian musicians. Is there a difference? Is it a stark difference? And how would you identify that difference?
Well, I am predominantly doing a solo thing here, so the chances I've had to get on the playground with other kids here have been few, but it really depends on the individual. On my most recent record, there's a woman, Rose Parker, who sings on the record on the last track of the Through the Fire album that I released last year. And she, in the course of her career, has been a national, international touring artist, just consummate professional, amazingly talented, soulful. And I was so fortunate to get her to work on that project with me. Um, I I've had a couple of experiences with different drummers, which is always an interesting thing because I'm stomp on a stomp board and I'm my own drummer most of the time.
Hmm.
And those have been really good experiences. And really recently, I was really fortunate to work with a fella here named Jeff Atchison. Check him out. He's one of the guys that has actually toured and lived in the States, and he went to I think won a big blues competition in Memphis once upon a time, and Gibson has given him an endorsement. Um, and he did a double bill with me recently, and really helped me kind of meet audiences up in those northern suburbs. And yeah, I've been lucky. I haven't played with a lot of Australian musicians. The ones that I have had a chance to play with, by and large, I'd say world class.
Hmm.
So uh, yeah, as thrilling as any of other interactions I've had there with bigger names and really special talent. Um, but again, there just aren't as many people. There isn't as much of anything
Hmm.
here. It's just e- everything is fewer and farther between
Hmm.
in general terms.
Right. Well, to catch the audience up on a few of your albums, Light and Blood, which is the one that I love so much, and then there's Charge and Through the Fire. You have several albums. Do you have a favorite of your own album?
It's really hard, I guess, to say anything other than Light and Blood, my first record, because
Mm,
that completely changed my life.
yeah.
Um, if I put on my music critic hat and try to look objectively back on it, um, I'm very, very proud of this most recent record, Through the Fire.
Wow.
It took me years to make that record. Um, and I think as a songwriter,
Hmm.
and having some clarity about what I have to say and how I want to say it,
Hmm.
that most recent album and really the next album that I'm just now beginning production on, that I'll hope to wrap up and have out into the world next year.
Hmm.
Um, my my relationship to my own songwriting and what I have to say has grown, has deepened, has moved to a place that really fills me. It involves me being in touch with the whole journey
Hmm.
from Alpine, Texas to now. There,
Hmm.
the perspective has grown, and just getting older and having more to look back on. When I look at the Light and Blood album, there is to me such a purity, even a naivete. I stepped into the recording studio in Woodstock to make that record. I had never seen a recording studio
Wow.
before in my life.
Wow.
I'd never been anywhere near one. And I walked in and made that album in 2.5 days with the few dollars I had in a checking account to be able to do that. Um, and I was shepherded exquisitely by an engineer and a guy that helped me produce the thing. And so there's a tenderness, there's a naivete, there's
Hmm.
a charm and a
Definitely so.
pure to that album. I feel that comes largely from the fact that I was shaking in my boots, like, what is this? And how long have we how much is this costing? And they brought in this, I don't know, $4,000 Neumann microphone that they borrowed for the session, put this thing up in front of me, and got the headphones and all the gear, and there's a video monitor, and they're in the control room, and the whole thing was just it was overwhelming. So
Wow.
there's a kind of there's a tenderness to that album
Hmm.
that was born out of a kind of an uncertainty. I hope this is okay. I'll just try to really put my heart into this, and so that there wasn't a real sense of like I'm gonna make a hit record. I'm gonna make an amazing record. Like it was more like, how did I end up actually finding my way inside a recording studio to do this? And those songs too, which are they're perhaps odd, very charming little songs. I mean, what I knew about writing a song was just what I was I was completely by the seat of my pants.
Mm.
And how I play the dobro is completely by the seat of the pants at that point. So what you got in that first record was just somebody who really had a need to say these things, to sing these songs, and from a really simple kind of beginner's mind place.
Yeah,
And that album continues to hook people
it
because
does.
it has that warmth, it has a purity in a certain way, I'd
Mm.
have to say.
Well, it
Yeah.
does, and you said it came from the heart, and you can hear that in every track of that album. If someone had to pin you down and say, "What kind of music do you play?" How would you answer that question?
If
Yeah,
that's all they ever do.
yeah.
That's all they ever do, and all I ever that's that's the only question that's maybe as challenging for me as where are you from?
Mhm.
Because I'm in probably about the 120th address I've had in my life. And I was in 28 addresses by the time I got out of high school.
Mhm.
So where are you from? Oh, wow. Wheeler, Texas, Brooklyn, New York. What kind of music do you play? And I've got all these different ways of answering that question, that it's really select, delicate sushi, sashimi with some bacon on top. Or that as somebody once said, the Ohio Players meets Hank Williams.
Uh,
Um, so it's not funk, but it's funky. It's not pop, but it's poppy. It's not folk, but it's definitely
Folky.
folky. It's not rock, but it rocks. Um,
It's a lot
it's
of blues
definitely
too. The
there's
blues.
yeah, and you've got this instrument that it's a lap slide guitar, so you're not going to get too far down the road before somebody pins a little blues label on you.
Uh-huh.
But again, I've been in Mississippi a lot. I've
Yeah.
seen an actual blues guy. I would never dare call myself a blues guy. Um, but yeah, so uh, the music, man, this seems to be this question seems to be like in the sidecar with me through my whole career. It's meta modern Americana.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
That's what it
good one.
is.
That's a good one. It's definitely Americana, but as you stated so eloquently, it fits in so well in Australia. It does.
It
Oh, and
yeah, it
I've got a question for you. This is for the light from the Light and Blood album, something I've always
mm.
wanted to know ever since I've been listening to it. Who was the water girl?
Oh, who was that? That was somebody who
You describe her as being kind of wild.
yeah, definitely. That was a wild time, wild experience. That was uh oh
Hmm.
gosh, what do I say about that?
Yeah,
Um
you may have to be nice.
definitely
She could be watching.
definitely definitely a muse that I encountered at a really pivotal time in my, it was at the time where I was really sort of stripping away all of the safety nets in my life, which led me to then take that leap to getting back down in the subway in New York and playing and actually start writing these songs. And it was this course change toward what a few years later would be going all in with my music. So I would say that's probably the best way to define or describe that, the role that person had in my journey. Was they were a huge part of me after having figured out what it was I needed to be doing and where I needed to really be focusing and what it was that I really had to offer the world, which wasn't being a .com programmer or a forklift driver or a ballet dancer or any of the stuff that I had done, but to really pursue the music. Yeah, that was the person who was one of the people who was really big in my going for it.
Yeah. Another cut from that album is Well and Good. Tell me about that song.
Well and Good was the last song that I wrote when I was just playing the acoustic guitar, as I had done since childhood. Before I started doing this lap dobro, before I started doing that, had always been just, and before I made my own songs, I sang every note that, every Willie Nelson song I could come up with, every James Taylor song, Paul Simon song. I was an acoustic, I did acoustic singer-songwriter material before I wrote my own songs. And Well and Good was written with an acoustic guitar. Every song I've written since then was written on the dobro, on the lap dobro. So that's one of the things about it. And it also is a song that the guitar part, and this was really easy to do on an acoustic guitar, there's this slapping kind of almost flamenco-like percussion that happens with the right hand. What you hear on that track is me strumming at the same time that I'm kind of tapping and drumming on the instrument. And I had figured out how to kind of do my thing with that on an acoustic guitar. And Well and Good started as, well, let me see if I can do that on this dobro thing, because I didn't go from just playing acoustic guitar one day to then only playing dobro. At one point when I was kind of coming up through the little club, downtown club ranks in New York, I was showing up in a taxi to the shows with an acoustic guitar and the dobro and a cello. And I was playing all three of them in the course of a set. So there was a transition period where the songs and the playing style was transitioning over to this instrument, which is where I've lived since, for 15 odd plus years now.
I noticed you have a keyboard there next to you. Do you play keys as well?
Just enough to kind of program in to create a little bass part or create stuff digitally. But I'm by no means an actual keys player. It's
What
more of a
all
tool.
instruments do you play?
Well, again, I've stayed alive with this dobro, really, which comes from Jackson, Mississippi. Actually, Morrison Brothers music in Jackson. But I came up. As a kid, my parents were very supportive of what I was trying to figure out musically. And at any point where they could afford to get me instruments, they did. So in the course of the whole journey, I've played around on acoustic guitar, of course, mandolin, banjo, bass, and I did a thing with the cello. A colleague of mine who toured and played with me very often in the early days is a fellow named Trevor Exter, who he developed a cello playing style where he strummed it like a guitar and accompanied himself. He's actually now gone back to using the guitar more now, but I sort of borrowed his cello approach to do some things, and he gave me a cello at one point so I could figure out how to do that. There's a there's an album that I released digitally called Lighter and Bloodier,
Yes.
and it's a compilation of basement tapes, live performances, demos, and things. And there's actually a cut on there where I'm doing the cello thing. But that was a bit of a
Is that the cut that it sounds like? It sounds almost like you've got a just a bass guitar playing. It's very deep. Dum, 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 maybe you're doing that on a cello.
it could be that. There's another track that's actually on digitally. I released it as a 3-track EP, but on I reissued Light and Blood on CD with 3 bonus tracks.
Okay.
And I redid the artwork. I don't have a copy of it right here, but I redid the artwork and played with the themes and juxtaposed things. And there's a track on there that you might have heard where I just play an electric bass,
Yes.
and then I sing in a falsetto. I use a vocal approach that I haven't used in anything
Yeah, I
else.
was going to ask about that one because it's kind of very different, yet it was put on I guess the EP Lighter and Bloodier, but it was such a great tune. I like
Thank
that
you.
you
Yeah,
did that.
Yeah, that was a really spontaneous thing. I was in Butte, Montana, and I was kind of recovering and regrouping after I'd had a major accident on I-70 going through Colorado. I'd rolled off an icy bridge, spun and caught the edge of the road and rolled down the thing. Not injured, no gear lost. It was freakish how I walked away from that.
Scared you probably though.
Oh, it was a pretty significant trauma, all in all. But part of the kind of stop and regroup, I did miss about a week of tour on that. Is I had a friend who was overseas, and he had this place in Butte where I could just go and hole up and get myself sorted out. And it was in the middle of the winter in Butte, Montana. The week I was there, there was one couple of nights. It was the coldest place on the planet. It got down to less than 50 below for a couple of nights.
Wow.
In this big, beautiful old Victorian house. And he's a musician as well. He's actually one of the people who helped me get connected with people down here when I first got to Australia. And so I had the run of that big house that had a studio and gear in the basement. And I just sat in the kitchen in the middle of a blizzard, 50 below, and recorded that onto a MacBook.
Wow.
And
do you have a home studio now? Do you go to a studio when you want to record something? How are you doing it now?
Right now, I'm doing it in this room, and there's also another room about 3 doors down here inside that it would be like a spare room, guest room. And I've built, just in this last month, soundproofing to go in there and track some things. So yeah, at present, it's definitely one of those kind of home bedroom studio, self-contained things. Yeah.
Can you pick up your dobro there and show it to the audience? Where all has this instrument been? You said you got it in Jackson, right?
Yeah, I was playing, what's the venue in Jackson? It's not Howlin' Mouths,
Yeah, I was going
was
to
it?
say Howls, but
Oh, there was.
I saw
Trying to
you in
remember.
Hattiesburg, not in Jackson, so I can't tell you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was playing there one night in Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
and with a drummer, a guy
Mm-hmm.
from Oxford, a dear friend of mine here, and right at the end of the show, one of the things you're not really, I don't think you're meant to do with a dobro
Beat it.
is do a
Yeah.
lot of this.
Hit,
And
hit
I've
it.
gone through 3 or 4 of these face plates
Oh, goodness.
as a result. But that
Uh-huh.
night in Jackson, my hand went through the thing right at the end of the show, fortunately,
Oh,
right at
wow.
the end of the show. Like that was the finale, was,
You hit it
kind of
too hard.
Pete Townsend style, just,
Yeah.
crack, bust the guitar right at the end of the night. And they were there at the show, some of the people from the store, and they said, check with us in the morning. I had to be in Nashville uh, the next night, which
Uh-huh.
was what, 7 hours,
Yeah.
7 hour. It was a good run from
From Jackson
Jackson.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went into the store that next morning, and the idea would be that we would just cannibalize one of their instruments, part of their inventory, take the stuff off of it,
Uh-huh.
and then put it on my instrument, and
Uh-huh.
pay them to order new parts for their new thing, and I would just take mine, and because the rest of the guitar was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I just needed the new plate and the cone inside. So what ended up happening is they had the boss come downstairs, and they said, you need to buy this case. It was just a chipboard guitar case,
Mm-hmm.
and that'll get you all sorted out if you'll do that.
Hmm. How was
And
that? How would that fix the guitar?
this was in it.
Oh. Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
Yeah.
Hold it
And
up.
they
Let's
said,
look at it. Beautiful guitar. Yeah. So you ended up with a brand new guitar.
yep, yep. And
Fantastic.
I got in the car and hustled over to Nashville that day, and then pulled the 2 guitars out and put them on the trunk,
Mm-hmm.
and pulled the pickup off, and did some quick, pocket knife multi-tool um, modifications, and got this one up and running. Um, and it's since been, yeah, it's since, well, it's probably played definitely over 1,000 shows. But it's also been modified and reinforced, and um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a much sturdier instrument than what I had before. Was actually a rather valuable round neck dobro, not made to be played on the lap.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a real beating, and held together until that night in Jackson. But this one's much more well suited for the kind of treatment
And
that I
you
give
got
it.
it for the cost of a case.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is so cool. That is so cool. Okay, so what have you recorded since you've been in Australia? You might have mentioned it earlier, but tell me about what you've done since then, since leaving the United States, going to Australia, and this new album that you have that's about to come out, or you said next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Through the Fire, that I released last year,
Mm-hmm.
was songs that had been written prior to coming here, and songs that were written after I came here.
Okay.
This next album, there are a few things for the next album that were originally songs I put together in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are things that I've written much more recently,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them as recently as last month.
Wow. Are you
Um,
planning a tour to come back to the United States anytime soon?
I am so in need of that for
Mm-hmm.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's a lot of logistics and budgeting and sorting and scheduling that I'll need to get figured out to make that happen. I've got incredible supportive energy coming from people stateside, and I feel honestly, I feel like I haven't done right by the people in the States that have continued to show me the love and support, in that I haven't gotten back there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long swim. It's a long ways to get there. And Yes, it's a major priority for me to do that. And what I would do, kind of in my fashion, is I would plan to come back and not just stick my toe back in the water, but
Right.
just dive in and do
Mm-hmm.
coast to coast. I mean, there are when I released this record last year, it was actually a bit embarrassing. The people in the States who've shown me so much love and support for my music never forgot about me for a second, even though I hadn't played a show there in 10 years.
Mm.
And I really owe it to them. And there's a small group of people who have been just absolute angels
Mm.
to me along the way, and let me know that they were tuned in, they were listening, they were paying attention to what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got that new record, they really sounded off and really let me know that they felt it.
Mm-hmm.
And they span from New York to Northern California.
Right.
So if I come back, I feel like I've got to hit it pretty
Yeah.
hard
See, what
for
you
a
need to
couple
do
of,
is you need to come into New York, play several shows in New York, and then you need to come down through the Carolinas, and then you need to hit Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi and Louisiana. Then just plan to stay a while in Texas,
right.
travel around, and then you can go up to California. But we're probably going to keep you here in Texas as long as we can.
Well, that'd be just fine. That'd be
Yeah.
just fine. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, it's a big logistics effort
Mm-hmm.
because I would want to do it pretty big. It's been long enough that I'd want to hit, and there's a whole huge market in between what you just rattled off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's up through the Rockies, all the way from New Mexico up to Wyoming,
Mm-hmm.
Montana, Idaho. That whole stretch would be a huge priority for me as well. So I'd have a lot of work cut out for me to do to come back, and I
Mm-hmm.
would want to hit them all. And I don't know,
You need to hit
it's
all
just
50
me.
states, or at least 49 of them, unless you want to go out to Hawaii.
Yeah, well, I need to hit those major markets, and you named most of the big areas where there are people that I really want to come back and show them what I got, and give back, really give back to those people.
Yeah.
It's so important, and reconnect with those audiences and the culture. Um, I live in uh, I live in a beautiful, relatively calm, easygoing, s- steady as she goes, really mild, civil, polite, considerate,
Mm-hmm.
safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to get back into the mix with the rowdy, brash, in your face, loudmouth Americans. I need a good dose of that.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we do. See, what you could do is what I said, come around, and then you could just do a sort of a zigzag across the United States. That we would like to.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So it's basically it's coming down to you've got to get enough funds together. Would you do a tour bus or would you fly? How would you do all that when you're here?
There might be some fly in, fly out points that would happen,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, yeah, I'd be in. Um, it's parked in Huntsville, Alabama,
Mm.
I'd be in a Honda Element.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
is this your
yeah,
car that's parked there, or someone
yeah.
owns one you can use?
Oh no, it's at my family's place in Alabama.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well, you got a headquarters already. You've got a vehicle to
yeah.
use. Come on over.
I know. Yeah, and there's the lead time too to get all of that lined up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to get all those shows lined up, and then it would be nice to have a new release in my
Yes.
pocket when I
Yes.
did it. When I did it, because that could also, if I did it the right time of the year, that could hopefully push up the odds that I can make some festival appearances and that sort of thing. Um, and to have enough lead time to line it up with all of the venues in all of the different markets too. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like from the day that I say, okay, buying a plane ticket, scheduling it,
Mm-hmm.
from the day that I know that that's happening, I reckon I need 6, 8 months
Right.
just to
You would.
work with booking people in the States to
Mm-hmm.
to get all the shows on the schedule.
You would have to book
Yeah,
several shows ahead of you, so that as you're traveling across the United States, you have shows already booked and you're booking additional shows along the way.
perhaps. I mean, my outlook would be I would have the entire tour booked before I
Yeah.
got on the plane to get there.
Oh, that's
That
even
I would
better.
have, I'd have, and that's conceivable
Uh-huh.
that I could have 6, 8, 10 weeks of shows on the books
Right.
and show up and hit them all. And
Yeah.
that's the way I envision it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, how's your wife, and would she be coming with you to come on this tour?
She would be coming at the tail end probably.
Mm-hmm.
She's done quite a few shifts as the roadie, and right, she's has ridden shotgun and come along and done that. Um, what we've learned is that is playful adventure exploration time for her.
Mm-hmm.
And it is nose to the grindstone time for me.
Right.
So it's better not to put both of those things in one vehicle at the same time, where I'm focused on getting a lot of work done and really connecting and really applying myself. And she's focused on, oh, look at that, look around, let's go here, let's go explore this, let's have this adventure.
Yeah.
So what we've talked about is that you know, I'd do 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever I would do. And toward the tail end of that, she would jump in. And then we'd have a couple of weeks to just go camp off in the mountains and
Yeah.
and just do that.
And do a
Yeah.
little shopping and see a few sights while you're here.
Yeah. And my wife, who's a full on, shamanic healer, dreadlock hippie chick
Mm-hmm.
who jumps in the ice water of the ocean every day of the year. Um, she's going to be one that's like, let's get a tent and the sleeping bags and let's hit the hills. Let's go to the mountains. Let's go camp and
Mm-hmm.
be out in nature. And that's going to be her only priority, really, other than, visiting with my family.
Right. Right. Well, it has been wonderful talking to you tonight, Bret. And I am looking forward to you coming back to the States. And I do hope that you can have a venue in Texas somewhere, preferably Waco. But
Yeah.
can't ask for everything. But I do hope to see you again soon.
Oh, I'd love it. I'd love it. I look forward
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for being on my show tonight, Bret Mosley. You can check out links to his music and everything below this video. Bret, thank you so much. You are
Thank you.
a awesome, awesome artist.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to visit with you.
Thank you. See you next time on the J.
All right.
Michael
See you.
Show.
Goodbye.